Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever noticed that the more experience you gain, the more difficult, simple decisions become?
Mm,
It's like aging gives you this hyper-aware internal editor who just dissects every single move,
right.
turning a casual thought or, a memory into a full-blown crisis. We're always told that self-awareness is the key to a better life, but sometimes it just feels like the weight of knowing too much.
That is the essential paradox we're really digging into today. I mean, in nearly every cultural tradition, know thyself is described as the highest virtue.
The ultimate goal.
Exactly. The prerequisite for meaningful achievement, for emotional stability. But the material we've gathered asks us a really critical question. Is it possible to be too self-aware to actually be happy?
Mm.
We're exploring what happens when our capacity for introspection, our awareness, expands much faster than our capacity for internal acceptance.
And if you ever found yourself just paralyzed by options or endlessly scrolling through past mistakes in your head.
Or feeling strangely separate from your own life.
Yeah. Exactly. Then you understand this burden.
Our goal in this deep dive is to move past that simplistic notion that more self-awareness is always better,
Right.
and instead understand the surprising ways it can become a liability. And I think most importantly, we want to figure out how to wield that awareness properly.
To turn it into a tool that guides us forward instead of, locking us down in self-criticism.
Precisely.
So to start, I think we have to validate the consensus here. Awareness is foundational. I mean, the research is unanimous that knowing your patterns, your triggers, your strengths, that's the engine of growth.
Absolutely. You can't course correct if you don't know you're veering off course.
Yeah.
Awareness is pure power, but that power is neutral. It requires skill, just like any powerful tool.
And what's the core insight here?
The core insight the authors highlight is that without that skill, awareness can, and I'm quoting here, it can turn inward and start dismantling the very foundation of your peace.
Wow.
It moves from, productive reflection to debilitating self-sabotage.
That shift from useful analysis to just paralysis is so fascinating. The first clear symptom, I think, that awareness is turning into a burden is when thinking just gets in the way of living.
Yes. Think about something simple.
Like deciding on a new lease or choosing a healthcare plan?
Right. And instead of just gathering enough information and then acting, your brain kicks into this hyper-analysis.
It's not just pros and cons.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. You start modeling potential regret 5 years from now. You analyze the decision through the lens of what your parents would think, what your friends might advise.
What the perfect version of you would do.
That's the one. And you end up frozen. But it's not because you lack data. You have too much information and your own thoughts they've jammed up the works.
The material makes a really sharp distinction here. It says, thoughtful consideration is essential for good judgment, but being paralyzed by your own analysis. Well, it prevents any judgment from being made at all.
And you know what gets lost in that over-analytical process?
What's that?
Connection to yourself. We cut ourselves off from our gut instinct, that quiet voice that knows what you need. For a lot of people, this is a huge contrast with how things felt earlier in life, when decisions just felt simpler, more fluid, almost intuitive.
You just did it.
You acted, you moved, you chose, and you accepted the outcome without immediately putting the entire process under a microscope.
But I guess the question is, how do we trust that instinct? If we're being deeply self-aware, doesn't the research also warn us that we have unconscious flaws, biases, wishful thinking?
That is the right question to ask.
So how do you tell that quiet voice from just poor judgment?
It's tricky. The overaware person distrusts instinct
Yeah.
because they know the mind is flawed. But I think the key is in the speed of the thought.
Speed.
Yeah. When you're paralyzed, you are cycling through countless cognitive arguments over and over. Instinct, or what we might call somatic intelligence, it's usually a quick embodied feeling, a gut feeling.
And overthinking is
Why?
a defense?
It's often a defense mechanism against accountability.
Yeah.
If I just analyze this forever, I can't be blamed for a bad outcome because I never made a decision. We have to learn to trust that quick signal over the endless commentary.
That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, if analysis paralysis locks us out of simple action, what happens when this intense internal analysis turns its focus inward toward judging ourselves?
That disconnection, it leads directly to the second major burden, the really unsettling experience of the split self.
The split self.
You move past just being paralyzed by a decision and into feeling like you are perpetually performing your own life rather than, just living it.
This reminds me of that high-performance analogy. You hear about it with athletes or
Yes,
musicians.
exactly.
If a professional concert pianist suddenly tries to consciously process every single motion, how their fingers are hitting the keys or how their feet are positioned, they just fall apart.
They fail immediately. The critical mind interrupts the flow state.
The flow is broken.
And in daily life, this means part of you is constantly standing apart, becoming the critical observer. This observing self watches and evaluates and critiques everything: your appearance, your conversation style, your tone of voice.
All for an imagined audience, an invisible one.
Exactly.
So you become the object of your own judgment constantly. You're modeling how you must appear, even when you're alone, just anticipating judgment that might not even be coming.
And it's draining. It turns simple existence into exhausting labor.
And what's really fascinating here is how destructive this observer becomes because it has such intimate access to our own minds.
Yes, self-awareness gives us this high-definition view of every single impulse.
The petty motivations, the unkind thoughts.
The insecurities we all have. This is where that term high-definition critic really, really applies.
Right, because we see our own flaws in this incredible, almost psychological HD, while everyone else's flaws just remain fuzzy and distant.
We only see their curated external presentation, their highlight reel.
And that contrast, I imagine, creates a profoundly distorted sense of self.
It leads to the crushing belief that you are uniquely flawed. Because you have such high-quality evidence of your own inadequacy, you just assume everyone else must have it together in a way you can't.
And for someone who seeks perspective, for the learner, this gets particularly painful as we get older and accumulate more memories. Awareness of the past isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's crushing.
All those past decisions, all the versions of yourself you hoped to become but didn't, they create this painful gap.
The gap between the imagined life and the one you actually lived.
And that's what's so devastating. Every memory, every missed opportunity, every moment of perceived weakness gets fed back into the system.
It becomes evidence of your inadequacy. It's like an endless trial where the past is always being used against your present self.
And then that awareness expands. It goes beyond just the self and into the existential.
So when we apply that same high-definition clarity to the world around us, what happens to those comforting illusions we might have grown up with?
They get stripped away. And this is where a kind of quiet despair can begin.
How so?
We start to realize that the comforting idea that life has some underlying order, or that good people are always rewarded, or that success is linear, it just isn't true. Awareness reveals randomness, fragility, and pervasive impermanence.
The realization that life doesn't guarantee a grand outcome, that everything is fleeting, and that there might be, as the source says, no grand plan.
Yes. And that realization is less a moment of crisis and more a subtle, persistent sense of emptiness.
Which leads to what you called quiet despair.
It's that feeling that satisfaction is always out of reach because the very framework we built our expectations on was incomplete. The agony is being conscious enough to understand the depth of life's uncertainty, but feeling utterly powerless to control it.
That is heavy. But it sounds like we're reaching a pivot point. The ultimate message can't be that we should try to unlearn everything and go back to being ignorant.
Precisely. That's not the goal at all. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the fact that awareness tears down illusions isn't the final chapter.
It's the beginning of something else.
That destruction, however painful it feels, is actually an invitation to rebuild on sturdier, truer ground.
I see. So disillusionment is informative. It shows us where our old expectations or frameworks were flawed or fragile or just based on fantasy.
This painful clearing is what's necessary to create the space for a more resilient understanding of yourself and of reality.
And since you can't go back, you can't unsee these truths.
The only healthy option is to move through the discomfort. The material suggests that awareness has two phases. Phase 1 tears down what isn't working.
And phase 2.
Phase 2 actively helps you figure out what to build in its place. The way out is not around, the way out is through.
So if awareness is the tool that exposed all the cracks in our system, it has to also be the tool that fixes them. So how do we start wielding it skillfully? How do we move from internal warfare to internal guidance?
The material suggests 4 core strategies for this transformation. And strategy 1 is fundamentally about filtering the noise.
Filtering the noise?
Yes. Highly self-aware people notice thousands of mental inputs every day. Some useful, some repetitive nonsense, some just cruel. The crucial difference is distinguishing between noticing a thought and identifying with it.
So if I have a moment of doubt about my capabilities, I don't have to build a whole story around how I'm a permanent failure.
Exactly. It's just mental chatter produced by an anxious brain. You can observe an unpleasant thought, and I'm quoting here, without building a whole story around it.
And that shift, I imagine, is powerful.
It's huge. It's often rooted in mindfulness practices, but it allows you to see the thought stream as separate from your core self. If you treat every critical thought as hard evidence that you're broken, you'll drive yourself crazy. We have to stop taking dictation from the inner critic.
Okay, strategy 2 is about adjusting those unrealistic ideals. We talked about the suffering that comes from holding ourselves to these impossible shoulds, but isn't adjusting those ideals just settling? Doesn't that mean giving up on being the best version of ourselves?
That's a really thoughtful question.
Huh.
But the distinction is vital. We're not talking about lowering your aspiration. We're talking about grounding it in reality.
Okay.
The suffering comes from comparing yourself to a fantasy version of yourself or to the curated highlight reels of other people we see.
So the idea is to move the standard from perfection to progress.
Precisely. The goal isn't to reach some state of flawless perfection where you can finally relax. The goal is continuous refinement and growth. The moment you realize you are a human being on a journey and not a problem to be solved,
The standard changes.
it immediately becomes less punishing and actually more motivational.
And strategy 3. This is reconnecting with instinct. It brings us full circle back to analysis paralysis.
Yes, if the issue is cognitive overload, the solution has to involve deliberately engaging the parts of us that aren't purely analytical.
It's about getting out of your head.
It's about engaging our somatic intelligence to bypass that exhausted cognitive mind. Practical examples from the sources include deliberately spending time in nature just to experience it, without the pressure to analyze or label everything.
Or engaging in movement.
Right? Whether it's running or dancing or even complex manual labor, anything where excessive thinking would actually interfere with performance. It forces you to be present. It gives that calculating editor in your head a much-needed break.
And finally, strategy 4. Practicing self-compassion. This feels so necessary, but maybe the hardest thing to implement when you're trapped by that high-definition critic.
It is the direct antidote to the critic. Self-compassion simply means offering yourself the same understanding, patience, and kindness you would offer a friend who is struggling with the exact same flaws.
A friend wouldn't say the things we say to ourselves.
Never. And the research suggests this isn't self-indulgence. It actually provides the psychological safety you need for real, lasting behavioral change. You cannot condemn yourself into becoming a better person.
You treat yourself as someone worthy of patience, and just acknowledge that imperfection is, well, it's part of the human condition.
And when you combine these 4 approaches, the outcome is what the material calls mature awareness.
Mature awareness.
It sees all the uncomfortable, nuanced truths of life and self without flinching. It acknowledges flaws without condemnation, and it leads to a profound internal steadiness. A happiness rooted not in optimism or denial, but in clarity and acceptance.
So that deeper, more reliable happiness isn't about avoiding difficulties.
Wow.
It's about having learned that you can be aware of problems without being completely consumed by them. You're less likely to be devastated by a setback and, I guess, less likely to be inflated by success.
It's the difference between brittle happiness, which shatters under pressure, and resilient happiness, which bends but doesn't break.
So what does this all mean then? The answer to our opening question, can you be too self-aware to be happy, is really a lesson in balance.
I think so.
Yes, awareness can make you profoundly miserable if it's only used for internal criticism and, stripping away comforting beliefs.
But no, awareness itself is not the enemy. It's a powerful double-edged sword. The goal isn't less awareness, but a wiser, more skilled relationship with the awareness you already have.
It's a lens that, if you focus it properly, shows you not just what's flawed, but also what's possible when you accept reality as it is. So you're not too aware to be happy. You're just aware enough to need to build a deeper, more grounded kind of happiness, one that's rooted in reality, acceptance, and deliberate choice.
And that leads to the most liberating realization of all. If mature awareness means accepting that life's fundamental uncertainty means there's no guaranteed cosmic purpose, no grand plan waiting to be found.
You get a massive responsibility.
You do. You get to decide what matters. You get to create meaning rather than endlessly searching for it. And this raises, I think, a really important question for you, the listener. If mature awareness means accepting the lack of guaranteed meaning, what specific purpose will you choose to create with the limited time you have now become so acutely aware of?